You're listening to the Coffee and Clergy Podcast. I'm Pastor Scott, and we're glad that you're joining us today. You can watch us on YouTube or Facebook, and you can always give us a listen on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. Without further ado, grab a cup of joe, find a comfy chair, and enjoy the conversation.
Hello and welcome back to Coffee and Clergy. Wherever you're joining us today, we're just glad you're here listening and joining us for a great discussion. So we said last week that we would bring a guest and a special guest, and so you'll see there's a few, one more person joining us at the table. Pastor Rick Foss, our interim pastor for our season right now in King of Kings, is here joining us. So welcome.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Yep. It's good to be here.
Thank you.
I am having a whole lot of fun on my fourth flunking retirement.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So you've been all around in your interiming days.
I've done it in two different states. Here in California, I did 3 churches in California, and I've done 12 churches in Missouri so far.
Wow.
I say so far because I don't know that I'm done.
Oh, okay.
And so like 15 churches I've served, and over 20-some years, 26 years I've done that.
That's amazing.
So a lot of experience. In fact, I'm one of the most experienced interims out there.
Wow.
And so,
Does that go on a resume somewhere, like most experience?
yeah, kind of.
Maybe not.
But every time I go to the annual conference that we have, I look, there's only one guy I know that has more experience than I do, and he's down in Florida.
Okay.
Okay.
And he's served more churches than I have too. But outside of that, I've got the most.
Yeah,
So
that's amazing.
I feel, and my wife says, yeah, because you're getting old. So
Yeah.
and I'm not willing to admit that yet.
So you've been here for like almost a year now, basically.
Basically.
And so we kind of are familiar with you, but I feel like for a lot of our listeners, they don't know you, that well. So could take an opportunity a year later, I guess, to get to know a little bit of the background of who are you and what makes Pastor Rick tick. So let's talk a little bit about that, and let's know a little bit about yourself, some basic things like where'd you grow up, a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I was born in Pasadena, California, and grew up in Southern California pretty much my whole life until I was in about 20. And then I went off to college and did all kinds of different things in my pre-seminary, pre-ministerial years. I spent a year in Ohio as a youth staffer, going around to 20-some different churches and helping them out for a week at a time. That was a lot of fun. And just kind of giving them a shot in the arm. So had a lot of experience with that. I did a short-term missionary thing down in Costa Rica for 6 weeks.
Awesome.
And we got into the backlands where you normal people don't usually get. And one of them, we had a hike down this road to get to all the places. We were going and sharing Gospels of John with people all over. The goal was for the organization we're with was to share a Gospel of John with everybody in Costa Rica.
Wow.
Do you speak Spanish?
No, I don't.
Okay, that's interesting.
So
How you do.
How did that
Southern
work?
California, we had two people in our team before that spoke Spanish.
Okay. Wow.
And one was
That
a native speaker, and then the other had a lot of classes. So they helped us out. And then they taught us, the kind of the rundown of what you need to say.
Yeah.
A good experience, and I learned a whole lot. God taught me a whole lot through that. I love short-term mission experiences just because of what it does for the person doing the experience. And I did a thing for 6 months in Italy, working in what was supposed to be an orphanage. And so we were modeling this old villa, and I did basically construction, and then about that time they figured out it wasn't going to happen. The laws had changed so much that you couldn't do an orphanage, and they eventually turned it into a retreat center. So it's a 4-story old villa built in the 1700s that, I like to go there sometime and see if some of my tile work is still there.
So that touches on some of your hobbies. I know that you're a craftsman. You like to use your hands and do stuff like that. I know you've done that for fun, but you also do that like because you kind of have to on your house and, and stuff like
it
that.
saves money, yeah.
That's true.
But no, I'm a woodworker, basically, and I built all kinds of furniture. When my first grandchild was born, I took off whatever I was doing and built a grandfather clock. So it is a true grandfather clock. Pendulum was swung on the day she was born.
There you go.
So
you are the grandfather clock maker.
Right.
So, yeah.
And the granddaughter knows it's her clock.
Oh, that's
because it'll
amazing.
go to my son, that's her dad, and then it'll go to her. And after that, I have no idea because I won't be around. So, but it'll have a little thing to say, this is a true grandfather clock.
Yeah.
And then name her and stuff. So,
Wow.
and then my favorite thing to build is acoustic guitars. I've built 8 of them so far. So, and that's been a fun thing.
Yeah, So God has been really good then on your journey. You're talking about going on missions and going world traveler and all these skills He's given you. So how did you get from those and experiencing youth staff ministry to then pastoral ministry? What was kind of your journey there?
I always had an inkling that I wanted to be a pastor, and there was times that I'd be gung ho for it. And there's other times where it's like, I'm not sure about that. But God was faithful, and God continued to lead me that way. And everything I did, all those mission experiences and different things, really kind of helped build a foundation for eventually, becoming a pastor. I looked at becoming a DCE. Because when I got out of college, I graduated from college out of Azusa Pacific out in California. And worked every weekend at a hotel, by the way. And then during that time, I said, well, if I could become a DCE, I can become a DCE in a year. And I just gotten married and said, oh, this will be great. And so on the way to to go to Seward and get that year education, we had a major accident and my wife was killed in that accident. And so that was in May. And that summer, then I said, well, what am I going to do? I don't have to be in a hurry to get a job. So I then went to the seminary. And so the accident happened in May, and by August, I was enrolled in the seminary and on my way to St. Louis. So kind of an interesting journey. And then I met my present wife after we got here. She was working for a church in the area, is a called parish worker, Johnny. And so married her, and then we've had 3 children. The first one is in heaven. He died during vicarage, and I like to say he's doing the best because he's run his journey and he's in heaven and completed it. And then I have 2 others, and I usually say, well, and about the 2 others, they're still in their journey, but they're great. The first one has 2 children and a wife, and they live less than a mile away from us. And the other one,
the grandfather clock family.
And the other one is single. His fiance died just a year ago or a year and a half ago, and so he's moving in with us here real soon. So.
Well, and I appreciate you sharing all of these, things, because clearly God has been with you through so much, and it's a beautiful story of watching, where God is placing you and how to use your that ministry experience even through the grief and the trauma of what
and that deepens your witness. It deepens your ministry in many ways, and you can relate to many different people. I've lost a spouse. I've lost a child. I've lost my parents. I've lost a sibling. There's different things that each one is unique, but it helps you to relate to people who are going through that. And that's a tremendous thing. For the people you serve.
Absolutely.
So it's been a good thing. So God led me, and I got to the seminary. I did pastoral things in 3 different churches, and that was for 13 years. And then I got to a church where I had major conflict. And I had no idea what to do. Nobody in the area had an idea what to do, and it went really bad. And I ended up resigning the church because I didn't know too much what I could do. and my parents were in a place where they had were running and owned a hotel out in Catalina Island, California, and so I went and ran that for 10 years. I had worked it for many weekends over the years, but I went and actually ran it for 10 years, and they could retire then. And so that gave me, it really deepened my ministry in a whole different way, because now I understand business and the business side of the church, and it, as I say, it made me a better pastor in the long run. So,
you had your little like island getaway almost as a way to rest and reset a little bit. And
but you know, I was bored. After 4 years, I doubled the income. I mean, everything was going good. I was doing construction and, you know, fixing things up. But inside, I was bored. And so I started, we had this interesting thing. I offered to pastors and other church workers that they could come to Catalina off season and they could stay in a cabin for a week, and it would cost them $20, because I figured that's what the cost me to have the room cleaned. And so we had a whole bunch come over, and there was two brothers that came over, and they were doing the intentional interim work for the Southern California, Northern California districts. And they told me what they were doing. And I said, oh, that's fascinating. And 2 weeks later, the one called me up and said, I'm visiting a church. I don't have any interims for them. And they brought up your name to say, could we use him as an interim? And he said, so what do you think? And it was like seeing the writing on the wall. And I just knew in my heart, God was saying, you got to walk through that door. You know, so I started living on the island. I had to take a golf cart to get to the boat, and then I took a boat to the mainland, and then I grabbed our car and drove for an hour to get to the church. So talk about a commute.
So how does that work? Like, did they know you were a Lutheran pastor at this hotel, or like did Lutheran pastors come through there often? Like, what was the connection there?
I got working with a guy. He was the first vice president of the district, Roger Sonnenberg, at Arcadia, which I had known that congregation for years. And when my wife had died, I had been going to the church, and he came and found me. So I know I had a relationship with him from a number of years before. And so I had worked for him for a year. And when I went back, having given up the church, he asked if I could come and help him for like 1 day a week. And so I was doing that. And that's how the person that made the contact mentioned it, because he was a jeweler in the area. So it's just kind of, you know, people knowing people and
relationships, right?
Relationships.
So you're now in that idea and that mentality of interim, and you like that kind of work. So what are some of the biggest joys of working in interim ministry?
The biggest one is I like watching God work, because I tell people, when it comes down to it, I've had the training, you know, officially I'm trained, I've got the experience, and every intentional interim is different. Every church is different, like every person's different. And I tell people I really don't know what I'm doing, but I know how God works, and I just listen to him and use the tools I have, and God works things out. It's just, when I get into a church, I just come in to listen. That was one of the things a year ago. Just I had 2 months to be able to listen before I really got started in the church here, which is a real blessing, because I got to listen to people and listen to their hearts and see what God was doing within the church. And that's what I try to do when I go into an interim church is, you know, what do they need? You know, they're going through the grief of losing their pastor because he either moved on or retired. But now, you know, what is God doing? What's God's plan for them when I leave? You know, and so I help them get to the next pastor. It's kind of an interesting journey, and everyone's been different. And then because of my background, I started integrating conflict. I've been trained by 2 different organizations on how to do conflict management, and actually my doctorate, that's a whole another story, is in conflict management. And so it's one of those things that I started doing that more. And that made it even more interesting because not only was the church vacant, but they were also going through a conflict. Sometimes they had kicked out their last pastor, and that made it interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and you had a great case study from your younger days as a pastor, that congregation that had conflict.
And that actually, one church, we got to the elders that they came to realize we really messed up. And they went and asked the congregation, would you forgive me? And for me, that was healing of the conflict I went through that has never been resolved. And I've purposed to go visit the church sometime. And every time I've tried, God has kind of prevented my going, kind of like Paul going to Galatia. It just hasn't happened yet. But one of these years, I hope to do that. You know.
Okay, so that was the joys of the interim. What about challenges? What do you see as challenges?
Well, it's always different. You know, my biggest problem and challenge is getting to know people's names. Because you come into a church, everybody knows who I am, but I have to learn everybody's name. Coming in here, everybody wears a name tag, almost everybody, and that is very beneficial to the whole thing. And so getting to know people's names, and I joke, when I got to know most people's names is when I leave. It's not fair.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I bet. Yeah. Well, I don't know about Scott, how you feel. I feel like that's a challenge as a church worker. Is like when you go somewhere new, it's like, okay, now I need to know everybody. I need to know who's who, and it's like you learn some names quickly, because of the people that are always there, and then you're slowly trying to build that. So I can see that as being a difficult thing if you're going church to church to church, in the interim ministry. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So the key there, if you want a pastor or a church worker to know your name, number one, show up. Number two, wear your name tag, and they'll know your name.
And the more involved you are, the better it is getting to know the name, especially if you have a unique name. So that helps a lot.
So tell us about what are your current feelings, and give us the unfiltered version of how things are going here at King of Kings. You bring an interesting perspective as someone who's seen a lot of churches, a lot of outsider perspective. So what kind of things do you see going on here that are interesting to you, that are noteworthy?
I love the church. One of the weird things, when we moved to St. Louis 20 years ago, we went to 14 different churches, and we decided to join our King of Kings. And so I was actually a member here for 6 months, something like that. Until I started doing the job I'm doing of intentional interim. And then I was gone, so my wife transferred to where her whole family goes. But we liked what we saw 20 years ago. So I've known Pastor Doug for a long time and been friends with him. So when he was looking at retiring, he contacted me about the possibility of coming in and doing the interim, because he knew that's what I did. And so, I like the church. I like what it's doing. Good people. And there's still some people here that were here back then that I recognized and saw, could connect again with them. And so that was always fun. The one thing I found as a challenge, an interesting twist to normal, I've gone 40 years. I'm 42 years out of the seminary, and I've gone all that time, and the only construction project I ever did was we put in an elevator. And now to come into this church, and we got this $700,000 project going on, and the guy is doing a great job of working with the contractors and all that. And as we talked about it, my responsibility is to help interface with the congregation and help them walk through this construction project. And the congregation has been great, by the way. And the staff has done a lot to help think the project through and to do it. And I just really credit the staff and the people involved with doing a great job of thinking the project through and trying to handle everything and help the congregation get ready and communicate and all those things that you're supposed to do. And so far, the project is going really great. We're on time, we're on budget. I mean, even we had to go through a mediation to figure out some things we couldn't figure out that a lot of people said were impossible. And we got it to the point that said, well, we appreciate you trying to get these things worked out, but we've got to let go of it. And so we can move forward.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just God has worked in such great ways. That's why I say I like watching God work, because He seems to work things out when we might think it's impossible.
Yeah.
So it's just to help the church to grow and to connect with God. The mission outlook that this congregation has is really good. And we're still, that's something a church will always struggle with, and just trying to figure out how to make it work. And my main emphasis coming in is working with the staff, working with you guys and the rest of the staff, and just to have things in a way that God works through them in the best way possible, and to help the staff to grow. And just develop and be a team together, and I think we really have that.
Yeah, I think from a staff perspective, like, it's been a joy to have you on our team in this time of transition with senior pastor, with Pastor Doug leaving, and our upgrades and such, and just having your perspective has been so valuable in a lot of ways, and just having someone who has all of your ministry experience and and this specific type of transitional change ministry, which is very, no one knows how to do it unless you've been through it. And so to have someone like you on our staff, helping that process has been
I think you got to be a little crazy to do it.
Well, I wasn't going to say that, but since you brought it up.
Think out of the box, you got to think, and just look for the positive things and help people to focus on the positive things.
Right.
I mean, it's been, for me, I mean, this is the fourth time I flunked retirement, and I keep flunking retirement because I like the journey. I like watching God work, and then who knows, my family becks against me. I said, I'm going to retire, and they'll say, yep, we'll see how long that lasts. So it's been fun.
Yeah. That's
so
wonderful.
In our last episode, one of the things that we did is we kind of left them with a little bit of a cliffhanger, because we were talking about our senior pastor call process and and sort of the future things to think about and look forward to. And there were two questions that I kind of left them with to think about. And the first one was, when a new senior pastor comes, what should I do? And the second one was, when a new senior pastor comes, what should I not do? And I think you have kind of a unique perspective on this, because you're here during that interim time when people are kind of gearing up for a new leader to come in, and you've seen people make mistakes, and you've seen people do things right. So maybe you can help us understand a little bit of how to approach that. So what are some things we should do, and what are some things we should make sure not to do when a new senior pastor comes?
Attitude is a whole lot, but a lot of times when the pastor comes, everybody's excited to have the pastor, and they have this honeymoon period, that they always joke about. And how long does the honeymoon period last? I've heard, a lot of times a year, and I've heard the shortest is 2 weeks. So it's like, oh, I don't want the 2 weeks. That's not good. But one of the main things, and that's where I encourage the congregations as they're going through it and looking at the next pastor, is not that rush that process, because doing their homework at that point is really important. The little phrase I use that people get is, do you want a spouse or do you want the right spouse? And people go, okay, I get it, from there, because that makes sense. And so do the homework to make sure this is a guy that has a outlook that you like, is a direction that you want to go. That I like to help the congregation figure out who they are first, and where are they going, and then find a pastor to fix with that. Because and so most of the time, the pastors that come during as a result of the interim, tend to stay a long time. And that's because it's a good match. And that's one of the things you want to find. But I believe, the first thing is building relationships. So what can you do as a member with a pastor coming in? What can you do to help build a good relationship with that pastor? So probably the first thing is put on your name tag.
Right.
Because then the pastor will get to know who you are. But also, if you have a chance, as it's appropriate and right, to go out to coffee, have a meal, have them over your house. I mean, just as time permits, and the size of the congregation varies on that. But there's a lot of things you can do to help build the relationship, to be very positive about it. One of the main things I like to share overall is to walk in forgiveness, because forgiveness and love go hand in hand. And you're calling your pastor, and that's a term of relationship. And your pastor, it's like your doctor. It's a person that you hopefully will get to know and love and trust and have a good relationship. So you want to build it in a way that it becomes a positive thing. And he's there as a commitment to say, I'm here to serve you. I'm here to help you, to work through whatever we need to work through together, because he's your pastor. And that's a special thing. So, I get to be people's pastor for a little while, but what a tremendous thing to be a pastor for a long time. And hopefully that's the pastor that, you have baptize your children and confirm your kids and marry your kids. And, that's what Pastor Doug did. And that's, why he's so beloved, because he was their pastor, your pastor for such a long time. And so you want to do, as you walk in forgiveness, no pastor is perfect. And every time I mess up in the church, I usually say, well, if you wanted a perfect pastor, you didn't get one. And there isn't any perfect pastor out there. So if the pastor makes a mistake, forgive him and continue on. The pastor forgives you. It moves on. And you continue to work through that, because that's the foundation we have that Jesus gives us. That love is based on a deep thing of forgiveness and care for each other. And so you want to try to nourish that as much as you can. And to get to know your pastor, get to support your pastor. Listen, one of the biggest things is listening. How does your pastor think? Where's his heart at? What is the things that his passion of where he wants to lead the church? Those are things you can work with and figure out how can we celebrate that together. So a lot of good things. So a lot of pastors have come in with a vision. For me, it takes me a while to figure it out, because I have a thing when the district president wants me to go, that's where I go, and I'll figure out the rest later. A lot of people don't work that way. They have an idea of when they're coming in, where they're going and what they're going to do. So listen to them and say, hey, now how can we work with that? If you find your pastor has a weak area, then figure out another way to support it. Get somebody, lay people in that help do that part of ministry. But it's always looking at the positive. How can you strengthen it?
Build to the strengths and compensate for the weaknesses. Right?
And don't criticize. Don't judge. It's counterintuitive. So
I think it can be a hard thing for a lot of us where, or I don't know if you can speak to this, but and both of you for that matter, but I think sometimes like where we have our pastors called here, right, and in many ways we have moments where they stand and you guys stand in the in between of what Jesus is doing, right, in giving us the absolution, I think of, for instance. And I think sometimes we can put those two together, right, where it's like, okay, well, if they're standing in that stead, then what is all of the things that they, we need another Jesus here as our pastor. And I think, we might not verbally express that. And obviously we want someone to live to be like Jesus, because that's what we're all trying to do. But I think sometimes that the lines can get blurred in how we perceive, in those things. So I think that's so important of, we're in the business of grace, right? How can we show grace even to our pastoral leaders? I think that's huge.
And there's some churches I've seen where they actually take the confession absolution and split it up, and the pastor says, I'm a sinner. I've messed up. All these things. Will you forgive me? And the pastor responds, Pastor, we forgive you. And then they switch it around and do what we usually do.
Yeah.
You know, and that could be very meaningful. So.
Yeah. So in the meantime, we kind of looked at like when the senior pastor comes, what to do, what not to do. So in the meantime, while we wait for that process that's led by the Spirit and that's being little L led by leaders in our congregation, what should the lay person who's praying and wondering what's going on, what should we do, and what's the best thing we can do to be active, to be doing what we can with our energies, our excitements, our concerns, to be ready for a senior pastor to come?
Well, what I learned when I went through conflict is continue doing what you know is right. And even when you don't know what to do, or you don't have the senior pastor that provides the leadership and the vision and the things moving forward, continue doing what you know is right. So you continue to serve the Lord, continue to be involved with the boards, you continue to work on the mission outreach, and all the things that you think that the pastor would want you to do. That's what I hope to be leading the congregation and doing, and then to continue acting on that. And then when the pastor comes, then you can look at the vision and you can tweak it and move forward. But continue being the church, continue living out your faith in the Lord. So it's only thing you're missing is the key one that's going to help guide you into whatever direction the Lord has for you to go. But the basics are all the same. So
But
continue on the basics.
We shouldn't wait to do anything until the pastor gets here?
My thinking is on it, think about it, is you may ask when the pastor's coming to kind of look you guys over, and you say, well, we've taken some guesses on what we think we should be doing, and so here's the direction I think we'll be moving, and here's what we're doing to try to get there. Or do you want to see when you come, well, Pastor, we're just waiting for you to come so that we can know what to do, and then we'll start doing it. And I think the pastor would like to see the first one first, because he knows he's got people ready and willing, and well, they're not waiting, they're going to go ahead and start trying. So I think that's the better of the two evils, is continue doing what you know is right, and continue to take guesses on how do we serve, because the pastor is just there to help the congregation to serve the Lord in the best way. And I think he should really fit in with the church on the direction they're going. And the two should come together. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think one thing, as we're kind of wrapping up here, but one thing that I have stolen one of your phrases, and I love this, that you say, this is a prayer process. The call process is a prayer process. And I love how you put that in perspective. I mean, that's, should be in some ways apparent, but just to say it so clearly is, that's what we're doing here. We're praying, and the timing and the logistics and stuff will come together, but we start at that process of prayer. So I love that you've given me new vocabulary in that way.
And in this church, we're watching God work. We're through the construction, through the service, through the staff. We keep watching God work, and we're going to watch God work as he brings the new pastor in. So,
absolutely. Well, thank you for being with us today and taking the time, and thank you for being with us and taking the time to listen to our conversation today. So I guess we'll wrap up our episode today with a prayer, and thank you for being with us and for God for being with us today.
Sounds great.
Heavenly Father, I give thanks today for your guidance and for your presence among us, and pray that you'll continue to send your Holy Spirit to allow us to have these open-ended conversations that are efficacious and that give us a extra measure of direction and clarity with where ministry is going here at King of Kings. I thank you for Pastor Rick and his availability to be with us and to share so openly the ebbs and flows of his life and his path to ministry and the ways that he has served your church and he serves here at King of Kings. And I pray that you'll continue to guide him in the work that you've given him to do. I thank you for those who are gathering with us to join us in our discussion today. Pray that you'll bless them this week as they seek to live out their Christian vocation with faith in their heart. So we pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Have a great day in the Lord.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Coffee and Clergy podcast. We're glad you could join the conversation. Coffee and Clergy is a ministry of King of Kings Lutheran Church in Chesterfield, Missouri. For more information, check out our website at www.kokstl.org. Blessings on your day, and we'll see you next time.